Chapter 48 Lightning and Fire. In order to put out the burning flames, the spirit wolf jumped into the middle of the pond outside the cavern. However, for some reason they didn't know, after the dripping wet spirit wolf climbed out of the pond, its appearance had changed. Its originally green pupils had turned completely scarlet. The spirit wolf's wild nature was very hard to tame. Once it received a strong and fierce stimulation, it could easily go mad. On a battlefield, the spirit wolf's madness could be a useful effect. However, to the students, it would be a disaster. The scarlet-red pupils were filled with a dreadful, ominous glint. The exceedingly angry spirit wolf's eyes were fixated on Mo-Fan. Its killing intent turned into a shivering cold energy as it lunged towards Mo-Fan. Mo-Fan's entire body stood motionless. This spirit wolf was far stronger and crueler than what he had imagined. Monkey! Mo-Fan was barely able to muster up the strength to speak. Zhang Xiaohou also felt this dreadful killing intent as he frantically linked his star path. Before, he was unable to complete his wind star path. Now, he had no choice but to do so. If he failed, Mo-Fan would be crushed to death in an instant. Oh woo! The spirit wolf flew up with its 4 limbs. Smoke and dust swirled up behind it. This explosive power! The transition time between the spirit wolf's immobility to jumping speed was less than a second. The explosive power was exceedingly dreadful. Brother Fan! Within the border between life and death, Zhang Xiaohou firmly grabbed onto the rigid Mo-Fan. A wind trail became Zhang Xiaohou's speed tunnel. Zhang Xiaohou almost stole Mo-Fan from between the wolf's jaws in this crucial situation, and continued fleeing toward the inner part of the cavern. Ah! The spirit wolf's teeth bit the air with an ear-piercing crunch. As it bit into the empty air, it felt a great humiliation. The dreadful creature once more broke out its astonishing speed as it chased the pair into the cavern. Within the cavern were quite a few people who had fainted. They climbed up with great effort, only to be greeted once more by a mad spirit wolf. These students were promptly all sent flying with their blood splashing everywhere. Run, run quickly, quick! Mo-Fan looked behind them. He could see that the spirit wolf was a bit faster than Zhang Xiaohou's wind trail, swift travel. I really am trying. Zhang Xiaohou was dripping with sweat, and didn't dare to shift his concentration in the slightest. The wind was whistling by his ear. Behind them was a tremendous monster wolf madly pursuing them. Even jumping would only cause them to slow down at this point. Just drop me in the front, run away after that. I will deal with it. Mo-Fan found his battlefield before he spoke confidently. How could I do that? I will not drag Brother Fan down. A friend in need is a friend, indeed. If he could survive this, then Mo-Fan would definitely be moved. The problem is, whether he would still be able to survive or not would depend on this godforsaken cavern. In the deeper part of the cavern was a spacious cave. The ground was ragged, and the top was completely covered in stalactites. This place had no students, and also no place to run. It was a dead end. Zhang Xiaohou had already done his best. His wind trail had already given the two of them enough time to fight for their lives. Now, the spirit wolf had finally caught up to them, and they had no way to escape now. Brother Fan, aren't we quite mighty? We baited the spirit wolf all the way here so the others could run away. Zhang Xiaohou suddenly said with a strange calm. Mo-Fan's back was leaning against the stone wall as he looked toward the spirit wolf who had already found them. He scolded Xiaohou, smiling, bullshit. I, Mo-Fan, would never do something like that. Careful. As Mo-Fan said this, sand and stones spurted out of the spirit wolf's mouth as it swirled up the sharp rocks within the cavern, before sending them flying toward the pair. Zhang Xiaohou was a wind mage. His movement speed was slightly faster. He initially wanted to dodge, but then he noticed that Mo-Fan was definitely not fast enough to do so. Clenching his teeth, Zhang Xiaohou shoved Mo-Fan behind a large rock. At this point, it was too late for him to evade the cyclone of stones. His body was instantly hit by the sharp rocks, leaving behind numerous injuries. Several eye-grabbing bloody holes appeared. Bastard, you bastard! If something happens to Monkey, I, Mo-Fan, will definitely stomp you till you become minced meat. Mo-Fan yelled angrily. There wasn't enough time for Mo-Fan to check whether Zhang Xiaohou was alive or not. Taking advantage of the time the spirit wolf was recharging, Mo-Fan closed his eyes. After he opened his eyes, Mo-Fan's pupils were actually filled with densely packed purple lightning. Eyes like lightning, Hair like fire. Stars shone from Mofan's pupils. After the gorgeous purple stars felt their owner's anger, they unified like never before. They connected into a beautiful, purple path, exceedingly dazzling in the dark cavern. The star path was before him. Mofan stood proud. Lightning strike, Python. As he said this, a lightning trace that looked as though it was a great snake appeared around Mofan. It represented the anger in Mofan's heart. He held his arm up high and gripped his hand. Lightning was crackling out between his fingers. The lightning python turned into a brave and fierce lightning soldier after receiving the command of Mofan. It whipped out in an explosive tangle of voltage. One after another, the arcs of the lightning python hit the spirit wolf's body. They electrified the spirit wolf's muscles, paralyzing them, and struck its skin so hard it burst apart. Ooh woo woo woo. Lightning strike's power was quite a bit stronger than burning bones. This was also one of the few spells that was able to injure the spirit wolf. The spirit wolf's fur had already been charred black. Blood was madly dripping from its muscles and skin. Even if the spirit wolf was in pain, it was still unable to move due to the lightning strike's paralysis. Its pair of scarlet eyes were still completely fixated on Mofan. That's right, it was killing intent. This mad summoned beast had already completely turned into a wild magical beast brimming with killing intent. That pair of eyes only had a thirst for killing and disdain for human lives. Fire burst, burning bones. Mofan's stars linked once more, his pupils turning from purple to a flaming red. The fire stars connected quickly under his burning eyes. They quickly formed into a star path that was able to draw the magical power from Mofan's body. Staring at this spirit wolf's eyes, Mofan's heart didn't feel any fear at this moment. What he felt was anger and an unwavering will. The spirit wolf's eyes flashed a trace of contempt for the weak human. It was like it was saying, "So what if you use it one more time? Burning bones won't be able to kill me. In the second that my muscles are no longer locked, I will slice you in two." Even though it was exceedingly painful, the spirit wolf was still able to endure the internal combustion from burning bones. The lightning python or the burning bones were still not enough to kill it. Thus, the end result would still be humans ending up as its food. You livestock. Mofan could feel the contempt in the spirit wolf's eyes. Look who's going to die. Mofan yelled out angrily. The fire stars turned into a scorching fireball condensing in Mofan's palm. Chapter 49 Crushing Using Wisdom. Die. Mofan yelled out and the fireball within his hands was thrown skywards. An eye-dazzling fireball was rising toward the roof as it instantly lit up the dark cavern. It then displayed the ferocious magical beast and the firecaster's image. The spirit wolf raised its gaze. In its vicious scarlet pupils flashed a trace of suspicion. Was this human scared to the point where he became a fool? Why were the flames flying toward the ceiling? The spirit wolf was paralyzed by the lightning strike, standing in one place and unable to move. In this kind of situation, hitting it with a flame burst, burning bones would be far too easy. It would be the same as the normal wooden doll which they used to practice with. However, Mofan did something that made the spirit wolf feel like he was a complete retard. Mofan was smiling with his mouth open. The light from the fire illuminated his fanatical smile. Boom! Fire burst. Burning flames was like a falling star in the air as it struck the root of a stalactite. The flames from burning bones wouldn't be useless just because the target was a rock. The internal combustion of the burning bones had instantly heated the slender root of the stalactite red hot. Gurgle. Just a second was enough for the flames that could burn bones into ashes to melt the stalactite's root away. The stalactite was massive. After it snapped from the heat and its own weight, it turned into a massive stalactite spear falling from the highest point of the cavern. In the beginning, the spirit wolf carried only contempt and suspicion. However, after it realized the snapped-off stalactite was right above its own head, it finally revealed panic. I won't bother seeing you out. Mofan slowly retracted the hand that threw out the fire burst before he smiled coldly. That's right. Lightning strike is only able to restrict your movements, and burning bones won't be able to kill you. However, this father, I, will use wisdom to crush you. The stalactite stone was massive. It was like a colossal stone sword had punched down into the body of the spirit wolf. Right through the spirit wolf's back, it was deeply pierced through the abdomen. Just like that, it was fiercely nailed to the ground. Blood started to flow out from the spirit wolf's abdomen. Following this were some broken stalactite rocks rolling off it. Soon enough, they formed a large pool beneath the spirit wolf's body. The spirit wolf stood there. It wasn't even able to collapse. Those scarlet pupils gradually returned to their former green color as the last seconds of its life passed by. It turned its head to look at the stalactite that had pierced its body, and then glanced at the insignificant human. Other than being unable to believe this, there were no other thoughts that could be seen in its eyes. The spirit wolf's arrogant dignity was completely gone. It became increasingly weak, so much that it was unable to even struggle. Life passes by just like that. By this tiny magician, a whistling sound was heard. A wild wind was racing through from the cave entrance. The students, covered in bruises and wounds, all raised their heads weakly. A man dropped down from the sky. On his back was a massive pair of wings condensed by the wind spirits, covering the people's line of sight. Wind wings. Mu Bai, who had finally regained consciousness, raised his head, staring at the man with mustaches in disbelief. It's Chief Military Instructor. Heavens, what am I seeing? An angel. The entire entrance of the mountain was astonished. They had guessed that Chief Instructor Zhangkong was a super strong mage. However, they never imagined that he was a high-ranked mage who was able to control wind wings. Wind wings. This was a spell that allows a person to genuinely fly around like an angel. Zhangkong glanced at this group of students who didn't seem like they were in a life-threatening situation, and then glanced toward the cavern that had a large noise echoing out of it. I hope that student who used burning bones is still alive. Zhangkong didn't dare to remain any longer. The large wind wings flapped with sudden force, and his entire being flew deeper in like an arrow. The ragged stones were slammed to the sides by Zhangkong. The chief instructor passed through the long path in a stunning manner before he finally arrived at the spacious bottom of the cavern. Fire burst, rupture. Floating within the dark cavern, Zhangkong was gripping his hand and a fireball appeared there. The fireball was tossed to the midair of the cavern before it ruptured like a gorgeous firework, illuminating the entire cavern. Zhangkong looked around. He only hoped that the spirit wolf still had a bit of intellect remaining, so that it would allow that student called Mo Fan to barely stay alive. That's why he didn't try to save the mana in his stardust. He hoped to find that student as soon as possible. The radiance from the flames lit the entire cavern up bright. However, in the next second, Zhangkong was completely flabbergasted. The chief instructor floated there, his brown eyes filled with astonishment. How could this be possible? On top of the stone platform, the summoner Bai Yang's expression was frantic as he sat there. His heart was only wishing for boss Zhangkong to get there in time. Fatal. Chen Weiliang was on the ground, completely weak. If there was a student dying on the practicals this time, he would be held fully responsible. The country put a large degree of importance on these magic students. Even the tyrant of Bo City, Mu Zhouyan, would not dare to injure the students in any way. Tang Yue bit her lip. She thought back to that day when she was still making jokes with Mo Fan. She had joked about how she'd use the WeChat locator to retrieve his dead body, but she never thought that the day would come so soon. Tang Yue was actually very interested in Mo Fan. On one hand, she felt that this student seemed to have another secret other than the growth-type Stardust magic tool. On the other, she thought that he had potential. She wanted to see what kind of realm he would be able to reach. A pity. What a pity. Bai Yang, just what happened? How could the summoned beast turn mad for no reason? Even if the burning bones was painful for it, there's still no reason for you to lose control. Luo Yunbo criticized him angrily. For a summoner, the basics of the basics were about controlling their own summoned beast. I don't know. Normally speaking, even if he were to be killed, he wouldn't start slaughtering the students without my command. I really don't know why it has turned out like this, Bai Yang said as he trembled. This whole thing really did not make any sense. Bai Yang never thought that there'd be students who could use burning bones and actually oppress his own summoned beast. What he expected even less was losing control of the summoned beast for this reason. There had to be something else in this. You should just pray for your lost beast to not kill too many people, Pan Lijun said coldly. I also. Bai Yang was about to explain, but suddenly he felt a fierce pain in his head. This kind of feeling was like his soul had been fiercely chopped. It was so painful that it made Bai Yang's entire face turn pale as he sweated profusely. What happened now? Luo Yuanbo demanded, as he began to lose his patience. My My spirit wolf. My spirit wolf. Suddenly, Ba Yang looked as though he had lost his soul. His entire being knelt down on the floor, his empty eyes looking over at the cavern dully. What happened? Tang Yue also creased her eyebrows. She had no idea what this summoner called Ba Yang was doing. My spirit wolf. It died. Ba Yang barely spit out those words, looking as though he had lost his soul. He sounded like he didn't believe the words, either.